Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Pension Fund Committee on the 18th of December 2025. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, turn off all phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly points in the car park. The public session of this meeting will be live streamed and a recording placed on the council's website. We will adjourn after 2 hours for a short comfort break if necessary. So, item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. So if I could ask Democratic Services whether any apologies have been received.
Thank you, Chair. I've received no apologies, but I understand that the Executive Director of Finance and Resources and the Head of Finance are unable to make the meeting due to the publication of the local government settlement today.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No declarations. So we move on to item 2, which is the approval of the public minutes of the Pension Fund Committee meeting held on the 30th of September 2025 as an accurate record. Can I see if anybody disagrees? I'm going to take that as read and I will sign the minutes accordingly. I'm going to ask, no, sorry, we move to the action log. So do officers have any comments on the action log? Good. And members, any questions on the log? Hoping this meeting is going to go very quickly today. We'll get home. Thank you very much. Okay, so we now move to item 3, which is petitions and public questions. And I believe none have been received. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the governance and compliance report. And Michelle Oakeston is going to present this for us. Michelle is the governance and regulations manager. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. So everything within the report is as stated. I just wanted to make some further comments around some of the consultation activity going on at the moment. So the government have launched 2 consultations in recent months to gather feedback on proposals to make the scheme fairer, more accessible and better align with legislative and workforce needs. So you may recall that back in May, the Access and Fairness consultation was launched. This was a large consultation looking at multiple areas, including survivors' pensions, death grants, gender pay gap, opt-outs, and some technical amendments as well. And the fund did submit a response by the 7th of August deadline. Currently awaiting the feedback to this response, but as we said at the time, particularly worried about the rectification elements of that consultation and obviously the resource to rectify those survivors' benefits. So moving on, a second consultation was then launched on the access and protections. So this was on the 13th of October, and we have until Monday to submit our response on that one. This one is covering normal minimum pension age, pension access for mayors and councillors, academies and fair deal. We have collated our responses and these are currently with the chair and vice chairs of both the pension committee and board ahead of the submission. But again, the ability to deliver is a concern at this stage in light of the other consultations going on and some of the projects that we've also got going on that we've obviously been talking about for a while now, such as Engage, pension dashboards and the McLeod rectification. So for both consultations from an administrative perspective, we've highlighted particular areas of concerns with resource and really highlighted the need for early and comprehensive guidance to be able to plan accordingly. For example, some of the recommendations, aren't just an admin point of view, but also a software development point of view as well. So we need to make sure that we're all aligned in making the changes. So moving on again, a poll response had previously been submitted on the Fit for the Future consultation. But then in addition, on the 21st of November, a further technical consultation was launched, slightly different angle to the first two consultations. So this is looking at investments, pooling arrangements and governance. And the deadline for this is the 2nd of January. And then a further supplementary consultation was released on the 8th of December, where MHCLG invited views from admin authorities in regards to the guidance around this. And again, we're working on this, but the deadline is the 12th of January. Some areas of uncertainty have been clarified, both in the draft regulations and the guidelines on this, on the guidance point. And through the draft regulations themselves. So the LGPS senior officer, we now know we need to have a single named LGPS senior officer who's responsible across the pension functions. That appointment must be made from the 1st of October 2026. The detail around the independence governance review, again, that detail, we do know we need to do one of those or undertake one of those once every 3 years, the first of which must be no later than 31st of March 2028. We are in quite strong position looking at the key criteria. We have been working for the last few years on things like internal controls, business planning, risk management, conflicts of interest and that type of thing. I suppose the difficulty with that one is appreciating the need for complete independence, but it does really put up some barriers, I suppose, in terms of what that could look like going forward on the contractual side. So if we've got contractual arrangements with some of the suppliers that would be offering this service, for example, we won't be able to use them. It raises questions, what happens if we've got different contracts with all of the providers on there, who would we use? Or if there was one available we could use, but we wouldn't ordinarily have used them, possibly for cost or because their business, the way they operate doesn't necessarily align with the needs of the service. So things to think about there, whether we think there'll be a framework. If not, obviously there's a full procurement additional cost with that. And then just the final point on this area is the appointment of an independent person. So admin authorities need to appoint an independent person to sit on the pension committee with non-voting rights, but they are to advise on investment strategy, governance and administration. And again, by the 1st of October. I'd probably say with this one, we need to find somebody that can actually give advice and have a view on things wider than just investment. So it's very clear it needs to cover the investments, governance and administration. So we obviously need to make sure that the person's got the right qualifications to do that. Again, need to be completely independent of anybody providing services to the fund already. And again, we've got to think about potential conflicts of interest. This independent person could also sit on other pension committees and work for other admin authorities. And then there's remuneration considerations as well. So I think really that summary, there's a lot more involved in all of those consultations. But really just a reflection of where we are, firstly in terms of responding to consultations, but also in terms of the amount of work that's going to come into play starting from next year onwards. What I probably would say just as a closing remark is we're due to bring the business plan for 26-27 and beyond to you in March. All of these activities are currently being scoped out in that business plan. And I think what we would probably see is a business plan with an activity section that is a lot bigger than we normally see. We normally try and make those sections quite concise to get through the year. But actually within each of these consultations, there are very clear actions that we need to undertake for each and every single item within that. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Michelle. As always, a very comprehensive report, and I stand in awe as to how you cope with all the various things you have to do, as well as managing business as usual. So thank you very much. I'm going to just make one remark, and then I will open this to questions, which is that I was asked for my comments on the access and protection response, which I failed to give. I think you asked for it for yesterday, but I have looked at it, and I am very much in agreement with the responses that you've proposed. And so, from my perspective, at any rate, please proceed. You haven't got much time, more time to do that. But please, members, any questions on this report? Yes.
Hi. I've just got a question on how we've responded to the 13th of October consultation. Especially interested in the minimum pension age.
Yes, so we've gone through the so this one was launched on the 13th of October, and we've got until the 22nd of December, which is the one that's going through at the moment. So it's with we followed the usual governance process, sent it to the chair and vice chair, just to get their views on it. But what we can do is, if in agreement, we can share that consultation response with you after the meeting, so that you can see each one how we've responded. But in general terms, everything within the consultation we are in agreement with. We've answered from an administrative point of view, more about not what the consultation's looking to do. We're happy with that. It's more about how we deal with the proposals that are in the consultation. So general terms, we're supportive of everything in there. It's just about the practical terms of implementing some of that and the guidance required.
Essentially, the minimum age is 57, is it? It's moving to 57 in 2028.
Yes.
I personally agree with that, but you may have a view. I mean, other than in exceptional circumstances where somebody's ill and does need to retire earlier, I think that's the essence of it. But the detail is in the response of the proposed response. And sure.
Yeah, I mean, the voluntary age at which a member can leave is normally pegged 10 years behind state pension age. So as that shifts, you'd expect the voluntary age to go up as well. And this is about whether to protect people who are currently, in the scheme with what is their current voluntary retirement age, which is 55. And we were supportive of what they were doing. Obviously, the practicalities is, as Michelle said, what we discussed. Well, I've got the mic. If I could just say the other consultations, which are the two on the regulations and on the guidance, which Michelle referred to verbally, government wants collated responses from pools, ideally. And so we've certainly been feeding in, and I was feeding into the guidance one the other day. And so unless there's something we really wanted to draw out, the intention is just simply to do that. So there probably will not be a discrete one for the Cambridgeshire Fund, although I will speak to Michael about whether he does want anything pulling out. Okay.
Laura.
Thank you for your report. In section 3, you mention the government's recent decision to restart elected members' access to the pension funds, public pension funds. And at least in England, I think it's been retained in Wales throughout. And I realize we may well have already members in the pension who were officers before. It looks like the consultation has not begun for that, but you expect the government to consult on it. Do you have an idea of what the impact might be on the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund, maybe just in terms of scale? Is this something that's going to increase our membership a lot? Something we need to think about our workforce or the team that's working on the pension fund because it's such a big change? or are the numbers not material?
Yes, thank you. So this element is wrapped up with the access and protections consultation as well. And I think we're not expecting large numbers necessarily, although I don't know if we've got any analysis on that at the moment. I can go away and find out. I think from our point of view, it's around the system capabilities, because this scheme, although quite closely aligned to the LGPS and the current scheme, there are some unique differences. So for that one in particular, it's making sure that we get the guidance early enough to be able to liaise with our software provider to make sure that some of the options available under the LGPS don't run through for the councillor and mayor options as well. So that's the concern at the moment. Effectively, if this goes live early next year, being ready to be able to cope with that. But on the actual numbers, I don't know unless Mark does, but I can find out roughly if that's been scoped out or can be.
The numbers will be immaterial compared to the rest of the membership, so that's not an issue at all. I think it can sometimes be quite difficult in the sense that you've got councillors contacting you about membership, which do different to scheme members. But in terms of just the practicalities, I think, as Michelle says, the system needs a few tweaks to deal with this. It's a slightly different implementation to what it was before as well. Yeah, it's just all about lead times for us, really.
Any more questions? Mike?
Yeah, just quickly, page 18, about the Scheme Advisory Board and the statements following the Palestine Solidarity Campaign's letter. We've got a follow-up paper from September. I wonder if there's been any more developments since then.
I don't believe there has been. There certainly hadn't last week, but Mark, have you heard anything? I think we're still waiting on some advice, aren't we? Yeah.
Yep.
Can I just ask, waiting on advice from whom?
From the Scheme Advisory Board, I believe. Is that where we're at?
No, 'cause the Scheme Advisory Board asked government to set out their position, and government hasn't as of yet. That was it a couple of months ago, Scheme Advisory Board? So Scheme Advisory Board took some time to deliberate over it. Then they set out some advice, and that's what they asked for. And the recommendation from our own legal advice was to wait for that position, basically. Although obviously what we have been doing in the background is obviously gathering information and sharing that through the investment subcommittee. The other angle will be the new guidance coming out around asset pooling, around constructing an investment strategy statement, etc. So that will feed into the future is changing effectively as well. Lots of moving parts.
Thank you. Well, if there are no more questions, can we move to the recommendation, which is to note the governance and compliance report? Duly noted. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to item 5. Ben Barlow, the Investment and Fund Accounting Manager, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, financial statement of accounts.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I should say what it is.
Well, you're right. There's a big document here, but it is sort of split into segments. So the annual report has already been approved by the Pension Committee, and the statement of account has now been approved by the Audit Committee. So that if anyone sits on both committees, there will be some crossover, and you may see a similar presentation again. What you're seeing new here is the audit results report, and I'm pleased to see we've got Asim online from KPMG, our external auditors, who will be going through that in a short while. As a team and as officers, we're very pleased with how the close down's gone this year. Don't want to steal any of Asim's headlines really, but we're pleased to say that the report's found that the accounts are clear of all material and non-material misstatement and errors, and we do adjust for any that are found. So it's clear of any material or non-material errors that haven't been adjusted for. So we've adjusted for everything throughout the year. Obviously, we do our close down during the audit. So there's some things that the auditor raises as we go through. One of those key ones was brought up in the audit plan, which is where we have certain numbers that are in there as estimates. As the year goes on, we get the actuals and we have to adjust for those. So that's just a normal process. So Asim will probably highlight a figure that was the difference between the estimates that we had in there and the actuals, but that's what we see as a normal process of updating those once we get the actual figures. There was one other slight annoyance for us, is that a custodian report missed off an investment manager figure. It was actually officers that spotted that with our current controls, and we adjusted for that as well. I don't want to steal any of Asim's deadlines, so I'll just say that we're very happy with how it's gone. It was done in line with the deadlines, followed SIT for guidance and the usual sort of regulations. The only thing we're now waiting on is the final sign off of the government accounts, because obviously we sit at the back of those. So until the government accounts are signed off, the pension fund accounts are not signed off. But this is sort of the final stage for us, really. It's gone through audit committee. The annual report's gone through pension committee. So this is just the final section for us, really, other than that final sign off. So unless there's some questions for me, I'll pass over to Asim.
So I have time for which apologies. I do actually have a question, because I commended the last year's pension report to the full council on Tuesday, and I used the figure of the funding level, and I notice it's different in this statement. And we'd always been working, at least for the purposes until we get the actuarial valuation of 170%, we're quoting 148% in this report. And I sort of just noticed this difference. So I wonder what is the one we should be reporting on here.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's the difference between the valuation, the most recent valuation, and what the funding level is based on what Mercers are giving us. So what you see in the investment subcommittee is almost the liabilities anchored at the last valuation, and then the assets valuation is changing. So that's where you get that calculation of assets against liabilities as a funding level. What we're showing is the point at the end of the year as well, was the 31st of March. So you'll be seeing the new valuation figure, which is about 30%. I'm looking over there. It's about 30% lower, isn't it? The readjusted with the new liability figure in there.
The 148 is after the new liability.
Is the new valuation figure, yeah.
So I understand that.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just to make sure I understand this. So it's 140. We're going to alter things to be a bit more prudent and cautious about it. With this 148% figure, that's after that's actually happened. We're not doing another prudence adjustment after that. Have I got that right?
Yeah, well, I know we'll go into it in a lot of detail later on, so it might be a conversation we want to hold on, but the discount rate is changing as well, which has a key impact on it. But yeah, it's going to be a new valuation figure, which then becomes the anchor for our investment consultant to do the performance ongoing from that point. But we will come into it in a lot of detail later on in the agenda.
Explain that actually in the report that I gave on Tuesday. But then I saw that I'd reported at the figure at the 31st of March as being 170. Well, it's obviously inconsistent with that, but it was still right in terms of the previous year's triennial valuation.
In terms of the point in time, it's right.
Yeah, sure. Move on to the auditors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll start off with firstly thanking the management, Mark, Ben, and the team for supporting us throughout the audit process. And as Ben said, we are in a really good position in terms of the work that we have done so far. So we're substantially finished in terms of the work on the pension fund. Obviously, as Ben mentioned, the pension fund accounts are still consolidated accounts as part of the county accounts, and the work on the county is still ongoing. So obviously we have to wait till the county accounts are ready to be signed off, and then the pension fund accounts, as they form part of those set of accounts, will be signed at the same time as well. In terms of the summary of work that we have done, I will go to our report. I'll take that as read, but I'll go to the key messages. And then if there's any questions, I'm happy to take as I go along, or whether if you want to ask me questions at the end, I don't mind either way. So to start with, obviously, on the second page, or second and third page, we have an audit team, which obviously led by Sarah Brown. She's the partner responsible for signing the pension fund and the county council accounts. Obviously, we have taken this report to the audit committee. So Sarah presented this report to the audit committee, and I'm taking the role of presenting the report in this committee. We are being appointed by PSSA contract. So as part of the PSSA contract, obviously KPMG and management have no direct negotiation in terms of fee or anything. That's basically just being dealt by PSSA, and the scale fees being set at that level. In terms of then going on to the page 4 of our report, which is our audit findings, obviously there were 2 significant risks that we had. One is the management override of the control. That's kind of a standard risk that we have across all of our engagements or our clients, to make sure, because management is in a unique position, and we look into all the postings that they made during the year to ensure that there is nothing which is either fraudulent or an error entry made by the management. The second significant risk that we had was in terms of the valuation of Cambridge and Counties Bank. Obviously, there's a lot of estimation involved as part of doing the valuation of that Counties Bank. So we treat that as a significant risk. And then the other audit key areas that we have is obviously in terms of all the investment work that we do for all the level 1, level 2, and level 3. As part of our work, we obviously go directly to the fund managers, get the kind of confirmation for the year-end balances. And then we have an independent valuation team who tend to value all the with the publicly available information for the valuation of those funds. We kind of look into that pricing. And then where we have any private equity funds or where the valuation of the funds is not available, we tend to rely on the historic information, and we do reviews of those funds to make sure that historically the information provided by those fund managers, how reliable is that, and then considering year-end information. And then, as Ben was mentioning, because we have the kind of time between the year end and when we are sitting here, throughout the year, we tend to get the updated audited financial results or the valuation statement from those fund managers. So we continuously discuss that with the management to ensure if there is any valuation which is different from the initial estimate that management has used, we ask them to update the financial statements, and that's what they have done. So as Ben said, there is no unadjusted errors or misstatement as part of the version which is presented to the committee. In terms of the obviously the main adjustments that we noted, one is in the Cambridgeshire and Counties Bank, where we have noted adjustment of 2.1 million. Obviously, management used the initial draft result, and through the year, when they have kind of further discussions with their GT as their expert and had the underlying data provided to them, they have provided them the final valuation update. So management has updated for that. Similarly, in terms of the level 3 funds, we have noted an adjustment of 14.5 million. Again, that's mainly due to the timing difference, because management is required to publish their accounts by the reporting timelines in June or July, and majority of the level 3 funds their March valuations are available late July or early August. So when we have received those valuations, we had a discussion with the management and they have adjusted the accounts for those updated numbers. Otherwise, obviously, there were some other differences that we have worked with the management, and these are noted all in the appendix. I take those as read, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take. In terms of the other area that we had is obviously in terms of the actuarial position of the fund, where we tend to look into all the data submitted by the pension fund to the actuary. And as the chair and Ben kind of alluded to the fact that there's a funding evaluation going on at the moment. So obviously management and their actuary work very closely to make sure the data which is being transferred from the pension fund to the actuary is complete and accurate, and they do a lot of due diligence processes around that. So being an auditor, we tend to look into that data as well, and we are happy with in terms of the overall completeness and accuracy of the data which is being submitted to the actuary for the funding valuation purposes. I'll take a pause here before then going into the appendices and kind of some of the things that I want to cover. If there's any questions on any of the significant risk areas or any other audit focus areas that I have covered so far, I'm happy to take those questions before moving on to the appendices.
Any takers? Thank you very much. You actually touched on a question that I was going to raise, and I'm sure it's been raised in the Audit and Accounts Committee. I probably raised it myself when I was sitting on that committee, but nevertheless, you take responsibility for the whole of accounts, including the liabilities to our pensioners. The audit work, this is for clarification, not to challenge you. The audit work that you do on the actuarial valuation is, as it were, process and system work. You're verifying that they've got the information, because if you put a bunch of actuaries in a room and there are 10 actuaries, they'll come up with 11 opinions about the valuation. You don't do any work on looking at the actual calculations that they come up with. So that's a question.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to take that one. So, as you kind of said, in terms of the actuaries, there's a lot of underlying assumptions and estimates that they have to make. As part of our work on the pension fund, what we tend to do is we have our KPMG actuarial team as well. So we engage them to look at the reasonableness of the assumptions proposed by the pension fund actuary. So yeah, we look at the underlying data and the data transferred to the actuary, but then we kind of engage our specialist team to look into the reasonableness of the assumptions proposed by the pension fund actuary as well. So we are not giving absolute assurance, but we look into the reasonableness of those assumptions used by the actuary.
So what about the discount rate? I mean, how do you satisfy yourself that the appropriate discount rate, again, for information, I'm not challenging it. I wouldn't even know where to start, but what do you do to validate that?
Yeah, so again, our actuaries basically from the market understanding, because we work with the number of clients and we work with a number of actuaries. So what they do is, like, our KPMG team drive their independent discount rate based on the market conditions and the market knowledge that they have. So what we tend to do is, what is the discount rate driven by KPMG based on our market understanding, and we compare that against what is being proposed by the pension fund actuary. And what we have is kind of a 10 basis point leeway, that if that is within the 10 basis point, we say that is in a reasonable range from our independently calculated discount rate against what is being proposed by management. If it's more than that, then we tend to have discussions with the management actuary to understand what is the rationale behind them having a bigger or lower discount rate as compared to our independently calculated discount rate.
Well, thank you very much. As everybody realizes, it's the discount rate that is really the important criteria, or certainly one of the very important criteria in coming up with valuation of those liabilities. Thank you very much. Very, very helpful. Any other questions to our auditor before you take us through the appendices? Okay. Continue.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go to the appendices. And then in terms of the appendices, obviously, one of the main one is on the fee. Obviously, the fee, as I said at the start, is being the scale fee as set by PSSA. So there's no direct negotiation between fee with the management or KPMG. One of the fees, additional fee, is for the assurance letters that we have to write. This is where the auditors of the other employees who are participating in the fund, they ask us to do additional procedures above and beyond our normal procedures to give them the assurance so they can sign off the accounts for those employees contributing in the pension fund. So we have received a request for number of for number of employees, where what we tend to do is we let the management know first that these are the request letters that we have received, and as part of the process then we get the approval from the management that they are happy for us to do those procedures and reply back to those auditors. And then the additional step is then we have to submit all of our work back to those auditors. Plus we then go back to PSS and say these are the above and beyond procedures that we have done. So if there's any additional fee, then that is being approved by management first, and then it goes to PSSA. My understanding is if there is above and beyond or additional fee, that is recharged back to those employees where the requests have came from their auditors. So we are in the process of finalizing that. Obviously, we have received a number of letters and we replied back to them, but the process doesn't stop till we sign the account. So I will make sure we have the management on board in terms of what the additional fee is, and that will go to PSSA. And if it's approved, then I'll let the management, and I'll bring that to the committee next time when we will present our any progress report. Then in terms of moving on to the confirmation of independence, as I said, the KPMG and audit team we are independent of the work that we do for pension fund. Obviously, there's no conflict of interest or anything being flagged as part of the confirmation that we have taken from the audit team, or not being flagged by the pension fund management as well. Then in terms of, obviously, we on the page we have noted corrected audit misstatement. As I said, we had throughout the year number of discussions with the management, and if there's any issues or errors noted or any updated information received from the fund managers, management have kindly updated all the numbers for those updated valuations. So there's no uncorrected misstatement in the financial statement. Then moving on to the control deficiencies, we haven't noted any additional deficiencies this year. Obviously, we had a couple of deficiencies or control points or process improvement points from last year, which obviously management actioned them this year. So we are happy with what the management have done. So we are happy to close those points as part of the final ISA 260 that we will present as part of the sign off of the accounts. But other than that, there's nothing that I want to flag. I'm happy to take if there's any further questions from anyone, please.
Don't hear too many questions, and I'm sure that colleagues on the Audit and Accounts Committee will have. This is the exact report that that's to confirm that this is the report that they have seen so far. So they know the status of where you are on finalising all of this. I don't think that we can, well, I can't ask you anything more. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work and hopefully completing the report without any issues and signing off in due course. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
What we're going to do is to move to the recommendations, and the committee is again being asked to note the statement of the accounts and the audit findings report. We note it. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item 6. Madalina Bratek is the governance specialist and will introduce the report on the Cambridge Pension Fund conflicts of interest policy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The aim of this policy is to ensure transparency and good governance by setting out how actual and potential conflicts are identified and managed. For clarity, a conflict of interest is any situation where a person's financial or other interests could influence or appear to influence their decisions and actions in relation to the pension fund. This policy was approved by the Pension Committee in December 2022, and the purpose of this report is to seek approval for the updates in Section 4. Just to highlight the main proposed changes, those include adding a reference to the General Code of Practice requirements, clarifying the obligations during the transition from access to border to coast, introducing a process for declaring gifts and hospitality, and introducing a new section on mandatory training in line with the fund's training strategy. Finally, just to mention, following the Fit for the Future consultation, the draft guidance from the government mentions the requirement for funds to have a conflicts of interest policy in place. Therefore, it is positive that we already meet this requirement. I think this is everything I wanted to cover, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
I've done it again. Apologies, Madalena. I had my mic on throughout all of that. So, however, that seems very, very comprehensive and nothing with which I would want to quibble. It's as I would expect. But members, any comments? That was easy. Thank you very much indeed. And yes, we need to keep all these sorts of policies under constant review, and obviously the change to borders and coast pooling arrangement we must abide with any conflicts that arise as a result of that as well. So thank you very, very much indeed. We do move to the recommendation, and we're being asked to approve the updated Cambridgeshire Pension Fund conflicts of interest policy formally. Thank you. Item 7 is the pension dashboard update, and Mark Whitby, the head of pensions, will introduce the report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a brief update from the report. As we flagged at the last meeting, which I think was at the very end of October, I confirmed that we were had connected. Indeed, we did connect to the dashboard ecosystem. It won't be a surprise to learn that we haven't had any queries come through, bearing in mind there's only expected to be about 300 at this stage in the entire country. So we haven't had any queries come through. We have got a couple of volunteers now, actually, within the Office of Resource who will be sending their own queries through, but we'll also be using our software supplier to get some really targeted ones, because we believe some of the more niche scenarios are what we particularly need to test through the coming months. So earliest we're likely to go live is end of October next year. This is our testing window now. The one thing, and the most important thing I think to bring out from the report, is section 3.3, where we had what we would class as an immaterial breach, but this would be common with all other funds as well. So what this is if you recall, we had a decision to make regarding AVCs as to whether we got the AVC provider to send the data to the ecosystem, or whether we got the data, stored it on our system, and then sent everything together. The idea being that that latter route gave us greater control over data quality and the information going together with the main scheme benefits to the ecosystem. Couple of issues. Number one, whilst we've got data from both of our providers, so Prudential and the legacy provider Utmost Life, the quality isn't quite where it needs to be in terms of what we're getting through on the in terms of being sent to us. And also there isn't a interface to load it. There wasn't a data view to store it on, but that is now available. But more I guess more importantly, at the dashboard end, they haven't got the ability to display it either. So all round, even if we could send it, we wouldn't be able to get it and display it. So for this reason, and for the number of people involved, we don't think this is material, and no other fund we're aware of is reporting it as material if they're even reporting it. So that's the rationale for this being an immaterial breach. Where we go from here, we are aware that if we wanted to change our route, we could change back to multiple source. So get any AVC provider, particularly potential to send that. So we're looking at A, can we get the quality right, but B, what is the resource required at our end to deal with this on a monthly basis as well. So we're still in a learning process, but we'll probably come to a decision over the coming months. And of course, if we do decide we want to change from single source to multiple source, we'll come back for a decision on that. That's all I have to add to the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Questions? I look around. What are other funds doing as far as the AVC is concerned? I mean, are they? You've mentioned it there, but are they having the same problem? Or...
Yeah, sorry. So there were, I guess, there were three things you need if you're going to store the data at our end. One is a data view, and that wasn't available. It only just became available just as we were going live. The other is, of course, the data, but then the ability to interface that data onto the system. And so the interfaces are still under development. I think part of it relates to data quality across the whole piece. So other funds are in exactly the same position as us. And some funds haven't, to my knowledge, I believe some funds are actually only connecting in January if they're with a particular software provider.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You mentioned the number of 300. Is that 300 people who are on the sort of the trial, the testers?
Yes.
I mean, I'm rather surprised they haven't actually tried it, by the sounds of it.
When I think around about October, I think there's only about 5 cases had gone through even the test system. So it wasn't really there was no volumetric testing effectively of whether it works. Yeah, the 300 will ramp up to I think about 20,000 at some point during the testing period. So it will increase in different tranches, but I believe we still are. We were in that 300 stage.
Thank you. That sounds much more realistic. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I suggest we move to the recommendations. We're being asked to note the contents of the report. You're duly noting. Thank you very much. We move to item 8, the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund Committee Effectiveness Review. Michelle is going to introduce that for us. Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. So for good governance practices, we ask both members of the Pension Committee and the Pension Board to share their thoughts with us on particular topics in order that we can make changes where appropriate to improve efficiency and ensure good governance practices. Going forward, as mentioned earlier, with the introduction of the Independence Governance Review, we will need to think about how this element sits with that new process as well. So that will probably be a committee discussion going forwards. But for this particular review, 6 out of 11 members responded. So thank you to who did respond. And in table 3.9, it contains the statements where either a strongly disagree or disagreed rating was received. And in the table in 3.10, it contains statements where 2 or more neutral ratings were received. So for each statement, there is either a comment or a proposed course of action, depending on what the statement and the feedback was. I wasn't planning to go through each one individually, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of them in there.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions from anybody? At least one member of our committee wasn't very happy with the way things were. I don't know. They didn't have to identify themselves, but I don't know whether anybody would like to make any comments, some specific comments that gave rise to an element of disagreement. I know they were confidential, so you don't have to say anything.
From the data in front of us, I only see one question that seemed to get a negative response. Did I miss something? The question was about the relationship between the board and the committee. Otherwise, it seems very, very positive, I think, across the board.
I think we are proposing to do something about that. I mean, that is quite important, and there isn't. The board should remain independent, of course, of this committee. It does an entirely different role, and is obviously much more concerned about governance and procedures and so forth. But there's clearly a very close connection, and I think Michelle probably can tell us what you have in mind for dealing with that.
Yes, so that was the one area that did receive one strongly disagree comment against it. And I think the difficulty we have is this has been the feedback probably for the last couple of years or so. So we have actively been taking decisions and making trying to make things a bit better in this area. So we've set up kind of things as in the report, an escalation log, the training and networking session, sharing of the minutes and things like that. I think from an officer perspective, we've probably come to the point where we've maybe tried everything that we thought might make things a bit better. So as in the report, we're happy to take any further suggestions, and we will continue to think about how we can manage this better. I suppose the reality is with member time and physically getting together and arranging things, I think probably the best way we can continue to go through is with the joint training sessions and things like that. But we're always open to extra things that we can do.
One of the areas I would suggest that doesn't seem to, particularly work is the board tend to get invited to be observers of this committee, but none of us have ever been invited to be observers at the board. Now, being able to do that would undoubtedly enhance. I only ever found out when board meetings were after they'd actually happened. And, you can't plan for something you don't know about.
I've got
Yes, thank
Anna,
you. We can do that.
who is a board member, and she wants you to address us.
Sorry, Jeff, did you want to get a response to Alison's query first? With that, do you want to do that? I'm very happy to ask a question, but did you want to answer?
Sorry,
Alison,
probably right. Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really good point. So we can get that set up going forward to make sure all committee members know when the board meetings are going to be scheduled. Thank you.
Anna.
Thank you. Sorry, I noticed at the end of table 3.9, and I hasten, I'm only an observer to this meeting, so thank you for indulging me, Chair, that there's a question about where the guidance was held. And while there's a link in the answering column on the table, I'm just wondering whether members would be able to find that if they were looking for it just straight out of the blue as part of their normal role as a board member or as a committee member.
Yes, thank you. So we've brought a couple of reports on this topic previously that has included all the detail. I appreciate just the link there, but we can circulate something wider just to include a bit more detail and to demonstrate where members can look to find the guidance as well.
Thank you.
The thing that I found when I was a pension board member was that the requirement for training was pretty much the same as for this committee and indeed the investment committee, which seemed, well, excessive given the role that we had. Now, I don't know whether, I mean, the board is clearly has to be established as part of the legal requirement, and we understand that, and it's quite clear that if you do sit on the board, you do need the necessary understanding and training. Whether it's mandatory to go through the whole rigmarole of everything that is involved in pensions to sit on that board, because as I say, it's more about systems and processes than actual decisions that are going to be. It's an oversight on the work that the pension team and the officers do, but nevertheless not necessarily oversight on the decisions taken by the committee itself. So I just wonder whether training needs to be more tailored.
Yes, and I think that's always been an issue with the way that the public service regulations were worded, more actually worded towards the board than the committee, when actually in reality it was very even across the piece. And work has been done through some of the guidance that's coming out now, actually, to make sure it's clear that it applies equally to both. I would probably say in terms of training, do appreciate that it's, quite an onus sometimes with the amount of training we have. And unfortunately, it's not going to get any better. I would probably say slightly worse in terms of the things that we need to be able to demonstrate in terms of training. So next year, we need to start being able to demonstrate that we know what these skills gaps are for the committee and the board, and what plans we have in place to satisfy the pension regulator, to ensure that we know and we're tailoring training appropriately. I understand your point, but unfortunately, that element, is going to continue, and we need to actually demonstrate more so on training exactly where we are, and make sure that, people both on the committee and board have the relevant skill set.
Yeah, just one word just to build on that. The new guidance is also sets out some things around the role of the local pension board with regards to certain things like the development of investment strategy, and whether the sort of like the consultation, and particularly the role of the scheme member on the local pension board, or the representatives, as to a way of getting the scheme member view around such matters. So we're also going to be looking at that guidance once it's finalised in a great deal of detail, and we'll have to look at whether there's any tweaks to what exactly the LPB does. And I think if it is involved in that kind of thing, then it might actually change the relationship slightly with the committee as well, if they're involved in things which maybe they weren't so involved with in the past.
Well, thank you for that. It brings up, of course, the general question of what is expected of members of any committee, really. We can never be and have the expertise that the officers have to do their work, but we almost need the same knowledge so that we can actually do what we're supposed to do, which is hold you to account. And there is the dilemma, and that applies to every committee, but I think it applies in spades to the Pension Fund Committee. It is quite it's onerous, quite an onerous training requirement, which I don't think is required necessarily of any other committee. But anyway, we have to do what we have to do. We're on this committee, and we will obviously follow the guidance, particularly as required by law.
Yes, and probably just to add to that following the guidance, there is quite a lot in the guidance on training specifically. Some of it we preempted, some of it maybe not so much. So we have got the skills and knowledge assessment lined up for 2026, which will be something that we'll all participate in. But what we will do next year is bring the training strategy back to you, which will cover everything that obviously, and make sure that expectations are set out, so you know exactly what you should be doing.
Thank you very much. So I think we should move to the recommendations, unless any further questions. So we have 3 points on recommendations. Note the feedback provided for the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund Committee and associated officers' comments. Approve the proposed course of actions to improve the effectiveness of the committee in the areas identified. And note the progress against the actions identified as part of the 24 effectiveness review exercise. Can I ask for your approval? Thank you very much. And now, I don't know whether we haven't got any confidential items in 9, which is the administration strategy review. And Corey is he's the employer services and communications manager, and he's going to introduce this report. Corey, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the admin strategy was reviewed last year. It had a major rewrite and restructure at that time. This is the document that sets out effectively our policies around the administration of the fund and the performance standards expected of both us as the fund and the employers that are providing the information to us on which we calculate all of the benefits. It's undergone the annual review this time just to make sure that the document stays up to date, and there is a track changed version included from page 161 onwards, so I won't go through all the changes in the document, but just the main themes to reassure you. It has been updated with the latest version of our objectives and our risks from the business plan and the risk register as they've been updated. We were finding as well that employers were putting a lot of reliance on iConnect, and there was a misconception out there that iConnect was working as a data checking tool as opposed to just a transport file, which is what it is. It's just a simple transport file. So I've taken the opportunity in the document in the digital administration section to make that clear to employers and to really encourage them to have their own quality assurance processes at their side, and not just to think that because iConnect accepted the data, that means that it's correct. So I have taken that opportunity. And then I've updated the escalation process as well to follow the current practice in the service, particularly taking out queries where we think they're just warnings. So that's where they might trigger a tolerance, but they could still be correct. It's in the realms that data might be correct. We're finding that either that comes back and the employer is saying it's still correct, or we can't get a response and it's unnecessarily holding up the processing of data. So we've removed that part of it, and we'll just be raising queries over things that are actual errors, which prevent the processing of the data or actually are so obviously wrong that we know it can't be right. So that should hopefully help speed up some of the processing. If we need to recalculate benefits as a result of that because the member identifies the error, then we'd obviously pick that up with the employer and charge them for the additional work of recalculating those benefits. Those are the major updates to the policy. As I said, everything else is in the track changes, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Corey. I think that sort of illustrates the complexity of this whole subject and the management of pensions. And indeed, obviously, its administration needs constant review and update. So thank you very much for that. Any questions and comments? Lara.
Thank you for the track changes version. That makes reviewing much easier. So section 8.5 of the strategy has new wording that says employers are responsible for the accuracy of the data provided and should ensure that they have appropriate quality assurance. I'm assuming that's what you've mentioned about observing perhaps a rise in assumptions about the data that they're providing and quality assurance that you might be doing.
That's correct. Exactly that. Yeah. So we're finding that they're expecting that because iConnect has accepted the data, that it's going to be correct and it's just coming through to us. So the problem with iConnect is it just takes an extract from the payroll system. So if they're not stepping in and checking that data before it's put into iConnect, then there is no quality assurance control going in before the data hits the system. So it's just to encourage that point that once they pull the extract from their system, they do check it to make sure that everything looks okay before they send it to us. One thing that we're also doing to help them with that is creating a checker, which will look at the format and some of the consistency data. So officers are working on that at the moment. The idea would be to provide that to employers so they can put the data into the checker, make sure it meets the requirements, then put it back into iConnect and submit it to us. So that should help with that quality assurance process as well.
Later on in the meeting, we're going to look at the performance reports and sort of meeting the timelines of responding to queries. Is this something that you think might help some of the issues that are identified there in terms of our response times?
That's the hope. By removing some of the queries that maybe aren't necessary in terms of processing the record, because they might well be right, we just think they've triggered a tolerance. That should hopefully address some of that. Remove the need to escalate those cases as well, which takes up officer time as we keep chasing those responses. I think what's happening is we're asking for certain data. The employer's saying, well, I provided that to you via iConnect, and therefore sometimes ignoring those requests for the things that they understand to be correct at their side. So yes, this should hopefully help speed up that process.
There we go. I think that's no further questions. Oh, sorry, Mark. Oh, sorry, Anna. Thank you very much, Mark. Anna, please come in.
Sorry, where are we? Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Corrie, if in a situation where somebody is working beyond their normal retirement age, because people can, are we sure that the system is capturing those people who then do retire, who then step down? How are we capturing those? Because obviously there's a point at which they come to their normal retirement age, but if they've worked beyond that and then retire, how do we capture those people to make sure that we are paying them their pension at the time that we should?
Thank you for that. So nobody gets their pension automatically. Even if they reach their normal pension age, we don't release the pension unless we're told that they've left employment and that the member wishes to take their benefits. So we do rely on the employers letting us know that the member has left by completing either iConnect if they're just leaving naturally, or if they know that they're retiring, then we do have a retirement notification form that they should be completing. Normally, the member's also expected to complete a pension information form, giving us their bank details, some of their options and things like that. So if somebody is leaving employment and wanting to take their benefits, we should be hearing about it through those channels. There isn't an expectation that we should be looking out for them in that way, because they may, as you say, they may not want to take their benefits at a particular age. They may want to continue working.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? So let us move to the recommendations again. We're asked to approve the changes to the administration strategy. Yes, we approve. Thank you very much. We're going to move to item 10, which is the administration performance report. There are two appendices in this that are confidential. So if any committee member would like to ask questions on appendices 2, 9 and 10, which is predominantly the risk assessments, can you advise me now, and we'll make sure that they're dealt with in the confidential section. Sorry, I've done what's not appendix 2 of. Anyway, 2, 9 and 10, mainly the risk assessments. So nobody's indicating that they do want to raise questions on that. So can we ask Mark to introduce the report? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'm going to concentrate my comments around mainly around two themes. One, the performance, and secondly, I'll just mention some overpayments that you may have spotted within the report, and just a few further comments as well. In terms of performance, at the last meeting, I was clearly hoping that performance was going to improve. It became apparent literally a couple of days after the meeting that there were deeper issues than I was aware of when I was speaking to you at that meeting. So we had been trying to deal with the issues, particularly in the retirements team, by moving staff around what is our biggest team, the operations area. I had an intervention a couple of days after that meeting whereby I put 4 extra staff on that area, so from other areas of the office completely, and they stayed working within the retirements, the estimates around that area, all the way through till mid-November. So therefore, what I expect to see in the indicators, we're probably going to bottom out in November on across certain indicators. Thereafter, I'm hopeful of a rapid and significant improvement from December onwards. Because effectively what we have done is try to clear down everything we had with those extra staff. And so some of the cases that were obviously coming through in November were out of time, with reference to the SLAs. Why has this happened? I think, we obviously lost some skilled staff around the same time, which I flagged last time. It broadly takes 9 months to a year to get someone completely trained up and fully competent across a portfolio of casework. So it's not instantaneous. Whilst I don't think we've lost any more over last month or so, I know we are going to lose an extra couple of staff in the new year who have already handed their notice in. And what this is happening when we lose people, we tend to, if it's promotion like these two cases are, we often have internal promotions and then it leaves a hole elsewhere and then you have to fill that. So there's a ripple effect that flows through. The reason we're losing staff is because the opportunities are far greater. Everybody is resourcing up to deal with projects. Lots of authorities will allow remote working up to 100% of the time. A couple of the funds very, very close to us have had people who have used to work for under myself actually, and have done really well. They've got promoted, go into really senior positions. They're attracting staff into those funds as well. So it's the most challenging resourcing I've ever known, but that's for every fund I think across the piece. We are also making some further changes. So I've decided to move the early lever, so the unprocessed levers, the business as usual cases into the same team as the ones dealing with the backlog. So we're going to look at that more holistically to make sure we can keep on top of that. The Hyman's support is now started. That's gone live. Some test cases came through a couple of weeks ago, so they're obviously going to now ramping up. So certainly in the new year, we'd be expecting them to produce the required output there. But yeah, obviously, I think the sickness situation has improved, although there are still isolated challenging cases. Performance isn't particularly an issue, I don't think, for the staff. So yeah, it's just that resourcing which is tricky as anything at the moment. But obviously, I'll be keeping a very close eye on KPIs as we move December onwards. Now, the overpayments were obviously a completely separate issue. We've undertaken probably one of the largest bulk reconciliations we've ever done, which is the McLeod. So we looked at every pension in payment where an individual was now in scope of the underpin, having not been before. And when we looked at what are called the final guarantee amounts, which is the whether there's an uplift for that underpin, we manually inspected every single one of those cases. And in isolated cases, what it pointed to was there was an underlying issue with the benefits that we'd awarded. And as you can see, in two of those cases, they've reached what I think is the £5,000 material limit. And we've reported them. One of the cases, I think the issue on the record was about 30 years old. So these are some really long-standing issues. What we've done is looked at our check-in processes and whether there was a way we could have spotted it. I think there is always a way you can spot things. It's just making sure you've got the appropriate holistic view of the record when you process it, and then some very specific things that you're looking for as you process it. So we've made some changes as a result of this. The total number of overpayments, most of which were sub £250, I think we're about 20 across the whole fund. So it wasn't even though it's a large scale exercise, it didn't lead to that many overpayments. So we're obviously dealing with those individual members at the moment. And as I think we said in the report, affordability is obviously the key thing we look at when we're dealing with those individuals overpayments. So those were the two substantive things I wanted to just touch on. Just a couple of other things I think to point out. Sorry, I should have said, when we're dealing with issues, when we're dealing with backed up payments, it does sometimes lead to reduced customer service ratings as well. It can lead to increased complaints quite clearly. It can lead to disputes as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't clearly an uptick in those over the next few months as well, as a result of what's already happened, if that makes sense. The other couple of things, our UK mortality screening provider went into liquidation, unfortunately. We've had to work really quickly. We believe we've identified the preferred supplier following we've done an exercise against the framework. We've been in discussions with them. So Michelle is just working that through with that supplier. It's a pretty low value contracts. So there's you know, a direct award from that framework is an acceptable avenue. And yes, I think I'll leave that because the other thing. Oh, sorry. There is also the overseas mortality screening. It's now in place. The contracts are live, and we're going to be carrying out our first proof of life exercise in February. One of the main options there is electronic document image verification, so the member can effectively scan let's say a passport or driving license and do it that way. We have got a backup if individuals don't want to do that, of course. I'll pause. Probably lots of questions. Happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Mark. As always, very comprehensive. Alison.
Mark, through you, Chair. You mentioned their staff leaving. Is there any learning points from those staff leaving which would have, you know, enabled us to change things in a way which would have encouraged them to stay, which we could apply to the future?
Yes, so there is a gap in our structure between officer and team leader level, which would effectively be a senior pensions officer. So I am putting that in place. It won't change the head count, but what it will do is hopefully enable us to retain some staff that we would otherwise lose. I think of let's say the last handful of people have left, we might have been able to keep one of them if we'd done that. But others have mentioned it in the past as well. So that's one thing. I will also, in the new year, subject to getting approval to do so, be looking at whether there's anything I can do, to also retain staff at a more senior level. We have quite a fairly flat structure under myself. So that's something that I will be looking at with probably with one of the consultants that we currently engage. So yes, there are a few things. Sorry.
The main thing is to pick up the learning points, and I'm assuming that all of that will then need to fall into the business plan because it may obviously have financial impacts at some point.
Absolutely, yes. The ones that leave on promotion, unless if it's at a very senior promotion, and there's not a lot you can do, but there are other cases, I think, at a more junior level that we can do something.
Actually, a dilemma that everybody faces in any business at any time. You train up people to do the job well, and they want to move on because they want to develop their own careers. Lara, sorry.
Given all the pressures in this particular industry that you mentioned, more and more people were going to need to help on all of these issues around public pension funds. Have we exhausted all of the routes of influence we have to encourage local post-16 education providers to be encouraging a route into this type of work? I mean, if we want to support local people to work in an area which we know is growing, can we work with the combined authorities working on post-16 education? Can we work with apprenticeships or work placements? Is there anything there that we've explored to grow our own?
I mean, apprenticeships is something we have had a number. We are going to have a number. It's a very good way for junior grades to get a bit of stickiness around the retention of those individuals. But then I'm very keen to make sure we've got a pathway for them to have a permanent role within the service. So that's really important. So we do use apprenticeships. I would say generally we don't have an issue attracting people at either the support clerk or pensions officer grade. We've got one advert. Before closure, we had close to 50 applicants for that role. We've managed to fill the post generally, but what we find it really difficult is to get people with pensions experience. But the issue is we build people up. You need to have a role ready for them when they're ready, at the point they're ready, and that's what is not always possible.
In the absence of any other question, we've talked about quite often the deferred decisions and the backlog. Hyman Robertson are now involved. They're now on stream. You may have indicated it before, but I didn't pick it up. Do we have a date when you think the backlog might be cleared, or it'll never be cleared? Because backlogs, I mean, people are always deferring, so they'll always take time to deal with their cases. But will it be cleared by next summer? Will it be? When do you think it will be?
No, it won't. It won't be cleared by next summer. I mean, if you look at the volumes, you can see what the progress has been. So last year we exceeded what our target was. In the last scheme year, as it were, I think we were targeting, I think, 1,000 in the fund, and we did that quite comfortably. We wanted to increase the volume this year, but actually we've actually struggled to stay still at certain points. I think we are showing a reduction at the moment. Clearly Hyman's will help. So I think it's almost like I don't think we're going to have the obviously the reduction this year that we were targeting. So ideally it will be gone within about a year and a half. I don't want it hanging around too much longer. So I think part of next year's business plan I would expect to be, providing Hyman's deliver, would be to continue that alongside internal processing. As part of the business plan, we'll obviously look at the resourcing, but I think the pressure at the moment is around two things. One is, have we got the BAU resourcing right for across the piece? And secondly, what's coming along for pension dashboards?
Are any of these decisions or dealing with these matters causing hardship to individuals? Do you prioritise the cases?
Well, obviously, our continuity of income is the key thing for retirements, and that's why I don't like to not see those indicators green. And it probably also goes for the deferreds into payment as well, because we never know whether continuity of his income is an issue when someone's left our scheme many years ago. So when we have backlogs of any description, we look at the age of the cases, the age of the member, what else is coming up, what other processes are going on, and so we kind of have a load of different targets and priorities all at the same time, as well as just trying to clear as many as we can as quickly as possible. The final thing I'll say is the movement of early leaver processing all into one team will enable us to better do bulk processing. So there are ways of running multiple cases all at once, and it becomes easier the more you've got and the more you've got together. So we will be doing that as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I've just see that in, oh gosh, what section is it? It's sorry, the August and September delays were due to employers in a large percentage. So is there anything that's kind of fed back 40% in August and 63% in September due to employer delays? Is there anything that's kind of fed back to employers to, give them some learnings or indication that they probably need to speed up the process? Is there anything, are there any commonalities, or is it, I don't know, is there anything that we can tell them to speed up the process?
Yeah, I think on some, I think you're referring to the customer service indicators, where sometimes the challenge is, does the individual need to have left before they can provide this information, for example, or can they do things in advance? And that can sometimes create an issue for when we get the information to be able to first process the benefit. There are things fed back. I think over the recent months we've said this has been challenging to get some meaningful data. The other thing at the moment, if I'm being completely upfront, is that where our own performance is not where it needs to be, and that will be, let's be clear, that will be creating issues for employers. It's very hard for us to push employers particularly hard when they're not providing information. So to a certain extent, I need us to get our game in where it needs to be so we can then go back. But Corey, I think you've been doing some work to try to establish patterns here, haven't you?
Yeah, thank you. So just to reassure you, first of all, one of the things that we did at the Employer Forum this year was a session with employers on the common payroll and data issues that we're having. So those things that are causing us the biggest headaches. We did a workshop session with employers that went down really, really well with those that attended. One of the problems you have with that is with the Employer Forum, you're almost preaching to the converted. They're the employers that are engaging. They're coming along. They generally are the ones doing things as best they can. Maybe you do pick up a few new things with some of them. It's reaching out to those employers that aren't engaging with us. I'm currently working with my team to set out some reporting based on the new insights reporting tools that we have to try and isolate some of these patterns so that we can start to have more direct intervention with employers where we're discovering that there are particular systemic problems. So we're looking to have that reporting suite built by the start of January. My team have been finalising some bits around that at the moment. Between January and March, I want to try and set a baseline with some of that information, see what's coming out of it, try and tweak that so that from April onwards, we can start using that for the more direct intervention when we need to be. One of the big things that I want to try and distinguish between is those employers that are trying to do their best, are responding when we raise queries to them, and they just need a little bit more assistance with the training, and those that are not engaging at all, are ignoring us, are not carrying out their responsibilities, where we'll need to take more direct intervention with them in another way. So I'm trying to be really careful in how I design this so I can distinguish between those that are really trying and those that are just ignoring us, rather than treating them all as someone that's ignoring us.
Okay. There are no more questions. I'm going to move to the recommendations, which are going to exclude any comments that anybody has on the exempt appendices. And we're recommended to note the contents of the report. I'll read all of this out. Approve the admission of the following transferee admission bodies to the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund and the sealing of the admission agreements: Atlas FM Payroll Limited, which is Fulbourn Primary School; Easy Clean Contractors Limited, Hampton Harrogate Primary School. Note 2 employers joining the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund as designation bodies: Bury Parish Council and Ufford Parish Council. Note the cessation of the following 6 admission agreements: Aspen Services Limited, Diamond Learning Partnership Trust, Clean Tech Services Limited, ACES Academies Trust, Compass Group UK and Ireland, which is St Bede's Interchurch Academy, Compass Group UK and Ireland Limited, Discovery Primary Academy, Edwards and Blake Limited, Coates and Primary School, and Taylor Shaw Limited, and the rest register other than appendices 9 and 10. We're good? Thank you very much. We move on to item 11, which is the Pension Fund Committee Investments and Investment Subcommittee Agenda Plan. Now, do any members have any comments on that? Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of matters on this. First one, we've got the member survey going at the moment on responsible investment. I'd say this to anyone who hasn't filled it in. Tomorrow is the deadline. So if anyone listening can fill that in, please fill it in. Would this be something that would come up at the February Investment Subcommittee to have a look at the, apologies if I've missed it. We've said already where we're going to discuss that, but would we be able to look at least at the preliminary results of that in February? And I've got another point as well. I don't know if
Yeah, we'll bring them as soon as they're available. I think February might be a bit tight. We don't know what the results are going to look like and how they all feed through from the investment consultant. But as soon as we've got them, we would definitely like to bring a preliminary results to the ISC and possibly to Pension Committee as well. But yeah, it might be a bit too soon to say we can do it for February.
If I may, Chair, obviously the development of the investment strategy and strategic asset allocation is we're certainly there'll be something substantive within the March committee, and this feeds directly into that. So it will definitely get an airing in March, even if it also gets an airing in February.
Okay, thanks very much. The other thing I was going to bring up was, as I was talking before about the advice we're expecting from the Scheme Advisory Board, and they're waiting on the government. I mean, I hope there might be something by February that perhaps the Investment Committee could look at. And if there isn't something by February, it does seem to me it might be appropriate for the Investment Subcommittee to consider their position, particularly on Palestine, but I mean, this would go with all sorts of oppressive regimes, and and things that we might want to do to have a think about our responsible investment policy, and whether we should reduce the risk of being found complicit by sort of looking at what actions we can take. Thanks.
Well, I mean, I think, again, this is probably for the investment subcommittee. But I think that we are going to look very, very seriously, first of all, at the results of the survey, our own view as to what that strategy should be, and it will be taken. All aspects of ESG will be taken very, very seriously in that discussion. So yes, it would be very helpful if the government does give us some guidance, if only that we can refer to an authoritative source, but we will have quite a lot of information and opinions on which to form that policy. So I think we have to leave it until then, but rather than say anything now.
Well, I'll just refer us to the advice that the Scheme Advisory Board has already given us, which is was attached to the reports we had, and the advice at the moment is that funds should consider whether an appropriate response is to conduct heightened due diligence in relation to investments they hold, to determine whether they're consistent with their own responsible investment committee. I'm not sure. I think we should, have a certain amount of urgency about this, but hopefully we will have good reason to look at this in February. Thanks.
In a moment, but Lara, you wanted to come in.
I would feel more comfortable if we had that topic on the agenda for the investment subcommittee in February, even if the officers can give us an update, the members an update at that point that we haven't received the government advice, or if we haven't received it, what are we going to do instead, in terms of keeping that topic on the table and the investment subcommittee receiving an update in February.
Well, we're obliged to set our strategy by March, so it will be on the table. We have to consider it.
Yeah, if I may come in, Chair. The other factor is the government has set out some guidance around investment strategy statements and around whether you can put divestment in. So we are looking at this is effectively what the future looks like. Obviously, at this stage, it's not in stone because it's still a consultation. But I think, as you're probably aware, a lot of the consultations are that there's consistency and there's not much movement in terms of the government position on these matters around Fit for the Future. So that's the other factor in play here. It's a new world. There's new guidance in place as to how you formulate them. And obviously you've got a pool with a completely new role, and whatever we put in place needs to be consistent with that.
And you indicated to me before that the government is saying you cannot have a policy to disinvest or divest. You can have individual decisions, but as a policy, it would be wrong for any fund to make that as a matter of principle. You can have individual decisions, but not a policy. Is that?
Yeah, I think the best thing for us to do is to, and we can use the stewardship and engagement update, because obviously it's following on from what was there previously. We can provide an update, including anything relating to what we believe will be the change in regulatory environment in which we're working.
Sorry.
Moving to a different topic, is that all right? Okay. So I know that pension fund members were surveyed about their sustainability issues that they're most concerned about, like for them to feedback to us. And I know that that closed in November. So I'm curious which agenda or which committee will receive the results of that.
Investment subcommittee.
Sorry. When you say something that closed in November, the RI survey is still open as of today, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, until tomorrow.
All right.
I'm just looking at page 227 of our pack, which we'll talk about later. I see it now. It's in part 2.
Sorry, you're referring to the dates within our table as to when things would take place. Yes, sorry. We had some technical issues on launch, so we did extend it, and we sent a effective reminder just this week to see if we can get any more responses. So yeah, it did slightly get extended beyond the original, but we still doesn't impact our ability to use it for the development of the ISS next year.
Thank you. On this subject, I should tell committee members that I attended 2 conferences. One was organised by Baillie Gifford for its clients, where they told us where their thoughts were and how the markets were looking. I attended with officers and indeed other clients of Baillie Gifford. ESG, very, very important subject which was being discussed. And I've also recently gone. Sorry. Did anybody hear any of that? I'll start again. It won't pick up on that. So I'm going to start again. I attended a couple of conferences over the last month or since we've left. The first one was with Baillie Gifford, who's obviously one of our fund managers. I attended with other clients of that firm and officers from here. And it was very interesting. They were telling us about their views of the markets and how they will trend over the next few years, their thoughts on that, but also ESG was high on the agenda. But more importantly, perhaps for this general information, is the conference that I attended with the Local Government Pension Fund Forum, which was a week or so ago. That was solely focused on ESG. I think it was something like ESG in an uncertain world, and I found some of that quite frightening in terms of their view of the people, the speakers' views of the world. Now, I'm waiting for, and perhaps I'll look to Ben for this, whether we can get some slides from that, which I'm obviously would be very happy to share. It should be shared with you all. And I will then do some notes, and they would have to be necessarily brief, but I'm very happy to do that, and indeed you should expect that of me. But yeah, I mean, people are very, very conscious of some of the issues that are obviously exercising the mind of all of us, Mike and Laura in particular, because these are matters you do raise frequently. So I don't know whether you count that part as a formal agenda or a plan, but I'm just reporting back on something that I've done. And we'll share as much as I can of it with you. Thank you. Having said that, if there are no more questions on item 11, can we move to the recommendation is to note the Pension Fund Committee and Investment Subcommittee agenda plan. Right. All agreed? Thank you. Now, the remaining agenda items are exempt from publication, so the committee will need to decide whether to exclude the public and press from the remainder of this meeting while they're being discussed. This exclusion will be on the grounds that the reports contain exempt information under paragraph 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. That is, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. So I ask whether you are in agreement that we should do that. And we're going to exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting. So if we need to, we'll move to a vote, but I don't think we do. Now, as the committee has resolved to move into private section, we will now close the public section of this meeting and the live stream will end very shortly. So I'm going to suggest that we break for 5 minutes.